United States Olympic Committee, Development, Enhancement, and Sustainability of Expert Performance in Sport Conference, 2008. Anders Ericcson, Ph.D., toward a science of reproducibly superior performance. Ericcson, a psychologist, spent 30 years studying expert performance of chess players, musicians, Scrabble players, ballet dancers, memory performance, and other sports. And these are the audio notes of his lecture. His goal is to develop a science of reproducibly superior performance, and he believes one challenge is the measurement issue, or finding everyday phenomena that captures reliably superior performance. That defines the essence of expertise in a given domain, such as sport and music. Can expertise principles in one domain be used to enhance or reproduce an expertise in another domain? I believe so, and this is what many expert organizations do on a daily basis. That is, highest performing businesses, school districts, governments generally are very organized, have a system, and adapt, adjust systems over time. Examples of expertise. Stephen Flume could remember and recite 80 random digits or numbers and displayed this on NBC's Today Show. This feature was accomplished after 200 hours of training, roughly 3 hours per week for about a year and a half. His performance development as a function of training. Ericcson and his colleagues trained Flume by gradually increasing three-digit groups together. And his point is Flume was an ordinary person who used training with reproductive organized system to accomplish an extraordinary feat. In other words, there is no innate advantages, or there were no innate advantages. His skill was acquired through training. More examples. Raja Manadevian also memorized 50,000 digits of pi. John Conrad, a waiter, memorized 16 complete dinner orders without writing it down. Music examples. Music has had experts for the last 4 centuries, and expert performance system is organized in a hierarchical fashion. That is, more complex tasks are studied, then mastered in a progression with one-on-one instruction. Student studies on own master's task, then more tasks are added by teacher. The level of performance of musicians is correlated to how much self-study they do. 10,000 hours equals music teacher, while 10,000 hours, or let me repeat that, 1,000 hours equals music teacher, while 10,000 hours equals professional musician. So I'm going to stop there and just review, because there were a lot of different concepts I want to kind of go over again. That last point there describes the amount of training in terms of hours to mastery, 1,000 being the least amount in this example equals a music teacher, whereas 10,000 hours of professional and or training equals a professional musician. And for me, that's kind of the crux of, or part of the crux of expertise in any specific field. And he actually was one of the original researchers that came up with that 10,000 hour rule, and there have been several books written around the same time that also go into depth on that. The other concept that I want to explain or review is it does not necessarily matter which domain we're talking about. Ultimately, effective practice and or study is going to get you to the next level in terms of sustaining your expert performance or pursuing excellence. And I want to just restate that in another way, in terms of being a leader, in terms of being an athlete, and in terms of being an academician. It does not matter all that much. How you actually train and or learn and or get educated is going to be a function of time. In other words, the longer that you're doing it in terms of effective training, in terms of hours, the better chance or opportunity you have to become successful and or master sport. The challenge is in certain domains you have a lot of people pursuing the same thing, so it could take longer to acquire that mastery of your skill set and or discipline. On the other end, newer sports or newer disciplines may not require up to 10,000 hours of training or education because they're newer and there's actually less people doing them. Practically 4 hours per day, every day, accumulates about 2 to 3,000 hours in 1 year. Effects of music practice. There are physiological changes in brain that parallel with skill development. Changes in expertise. Expertise can be measured by results. Examples: chess experts win chess games, and competing in 50 chess games takes about 100 to 250 hours to get rating 1. Teaching experts. Superior ability to increase students' performance takes about 500 to 1,000 contact hours. Medical experts. Superior ability to increase particular types of patients' health takes about 50 to 100 successful surgeries, which takes about 200 to 400 hours. Ultimately, the expert's success is compared to their peers per their profession, and this is how expert level versus non-expert level is defined. In other words, there's a continuum from non-expert to expert based on success and performance rates. Capturing expert performance. Identify a challenging and difficult situation where experts are supposed to excel. Recreate the situation in a lab so actions and thoughts of novices versus experts can be compared. In chess, this was accomplished by asking novices and experts to think out loud or explain how, what, and why they would make the next move. Expert chess players explore all possibilities with systematic investigation, then make moves based on final evaluation. This lab test led to chess masters showing and telling scientists they did not need to see chessboard to calculate best moves. They could see game in head and evaluate to make the best move. World champion chess master Ericcson beat about 30 skilled players at the same time while blindfolded. Research shows meaningful situations correspond to levels of chess masters. In other words, if chess move is applicable, masters can figure out best move in head by going through mental process or by randomly rearranging pieces on chessboard. Chess masters show no significant advantage for memory performance for regular positions versus random positions. Increases due to training. Or chess masters show no significant advantage for memory. Memory performance for regular positions versus random position increases due to training. So I'm just going to kind of restate that again, even though I've just said it twice. If the pieces on the board are randomly placed, they don't have any advantage at all. However, in an organized chess game, they memorize actually strategies and positions based on, how a game would be played. So if it's randomly placed on the table, they don't have any memory skill for that because they would never they'd never be in that situation. They would be in situations where they actually have to be, in my words, a sport-specific scenario where they practice over and over and over again in their mind. Ericcson research shows that after 50 hours of chess training brings novice level players up to master level. Chess playing memory appears to be highly correlated with situational end games. Other chess masters and predict next best move. If prediction is correct, master improves. If prediction is wrong, masters must figure out why move is wrong in order to improve. Time helps chess masters improve, and novices can make moves in 15 minutes that it takes masters only 15 seconds to make. Chess performance is not developed by how many games played. It is developed by how many hours spent studying chess games alone. Initial chess masters spend about 6,000 hours studying chess games alone during their first 10 years of training. Studying published games allows feedback for correct and incorrect chess moves or predictions. So there's some concepts I think there that are very applicable to sport and or life for that matter. In my profession, we have a lot of coaches and people that are in the sport that think the value of learning is going to come through how many games are played. And what I'm trying to do with people that I'm around and people that I coach is, get them to buy into training. Training is actually going to make you much better. Performing in competition makes you better at performing in competition in this way. You get better at performing in competition. However, if your skill set is not necessarily where it needs to do in terms of mastery of a double leg, single leg, counters to those both ankle lace, single lace, can you get what I'm saying? So you may not necessarily have an advantage in your skills, although your anxiety for competition may actually go down. But prior to having, your anxiety levels, which is a big part of sport, we need to, certainly be working on that. But my idea is actually to increase the amount of training so that we can master specific movements of sport, strategies of sport, and that's gonna come through training, because you can actually simulate competitions in your training. And just to kind of reiterate, why I think that principle is applicable for us, I'll reread that statement again. Chess performance is not developed by how many games played. It is developed by how many hours spent studying chess games alone. So for wrestling purposes, or probably for any purposes, you can actually, how would that be applicable? You may be asking yourself, how could you study sport alone? In our sport, you can actually watch film. You can watch film of yourself. You can watch film and or video. These days, if you go on YouTube, for instance, if you type in freestyle wrestling or Greco-Roman wrestling or folk style wrestling, thousands of videos will actually come up, and you can actually pinpoint specific movements too. If you wanted to watch a headlock, for instance, you could probably type Greco-Roman headlock and you'd see, maybe, or you type in World Cup or World Championships Greco-Roman headlock, you'd probably find a bunch of different examples from the World Cup or the World Championships. And or you could study your own matches. The bottom line there is studying your matches and studying the matches of others is going to give you study time alone outside of the room, which is actually going to make you a better performer if you are doing deliberate practice where you're actually engaging in practice that is, not necessarily easy, and it's going to stretch you in terms of your development. The expert performance approach identifies stable, reproducible, and maximal performances. Tasks to be used. Within 15 minutes, experts of chess, typing, and music can be identified based on performance lab tests and time it takes for standard tasks to be completed correctly at a high level or expert level. Deliberate practice. Ericcson and Lehman, 1996 definition. Individualized training activities, especially designed by coach or teacher to improve specific aspects of individual's performance through repetition and successive refinement. Also, to receive maximal benefit from feedback, individuals have to monitor their training with full concentration, which is effortful and limits duration of daily training. So I'm just going to review that deliberate practice concept. That's the essence of getting better. Deliberate practice, focusing on specific tasks that are actually going to make you better at doing the specific sports skill that you want to do repeatedly in succession, and studying those movements so that you can actually get better, in addition to having someone watch you so they can actually give you, appropriate feedback on what they see. In other words, you doing it yourself is one thing. Having a coach or a teacher actually watch you do it and giving you feedback on that practice session is actually going to get you in another level of refinement to develop your skill set. Precocious development. Practice is necessary, and musical prodigies are starting their training much earlier and spend much more time training than non-prodigies. It's unclear if they can learn any faster, but they are spending more time training. Thus, their superior performance is a product of training. Their abilities and their mastery trajectory of their progress is the same as normal musicians. Higher level performance is an acquired ability and structured ability. So I'm just gonna, some of these points are poignant to me in terms of, getting coaches and athletes and parents and volunteers to buy into the concept of deliberate practice and actual practice in general. Deliberate practice, and again, is the focus on doing specific tasks to get a specific response and or growth and or adaptation and or development. In other words, the next statement that came after that, precocious development, his research suggests that, masters of sport, novices and prodigies, they don't learn faster than any other people do, or novice versus the master or the expert. The challenge is, though, when you continue to practice over and over and over and over again, years and hundreds of hours in essence, it looks like these people are geniuses, and they are getting better in sport because of the accumulation of training. Does that make sense? So after you've done something a number of times and you keep building a base on top of the base that's already there, now you have experts of performance. And I'll just use a different discipline so it makes a lot of sense. Someone who studies several hundred hours of Spanish, and let's say they're an English speaker, but they've studied several hundred hours of Spanish, that may take a year or two or three. If you put them next to someone that has never studied Spanish, they're going to have a clear advantage on some type of, oral test and or written test. And it doesn't make them any smarter than a person that has never studied. It's just that they've been studying it longer. So that principle or that idea can be applied to sport in nearly every discipline and domain that you can think of. Skill performance and cognitive ability. According to research tests, skill performance in chess, music, Scrabble, architecture, and other creative domains is not correlated to cognitive ability or IQ. Examples: Scrabble world champion is from Thailand and speaks poor English, and Scripps Spelling Bee student champion told interviewers they studied alone for many hours per day. The point: accumulated time spent studying alone is the best predictor for high, skilled, or superior performances. Expert performance approach in sport. Capture superior performance in lab or under standardized conditions. Number 2, assess structure of acquired mechanism and adaptations mediating superior performance. Number 3, create deliberate practice activities that induce improvements in complex skills and adaptations. Number 4, challenge may be to go from specific changes and integrating development into superior performance. The development of superior performance in sport. Even the most talented have to spend 10 years training before they start winning at international level. Improvement is gradual and takes time. The highest level of performance is attained in 30s and even 40s in many intellectual domains. And last example, or age 30s and 40s, this is 10 to 20 years after physical maturation, suggesting that experience is necessary to reach and attain consistent superior performances. The Tenure Rule. To mastery of anything is not set in stone. That is, it could be 7, 10, 12 years, or even 20 years to international music, or to win international music competitions, as an example. Even so-called naturals have to spend a lot of time mastering sport. Example, Babe Ericcson and the many sports that she did, and Michael Jordan in basketball. So I'm going to review some of that stuff again, just to kind of point out the things that I think are really extremely important. Studies have shown that you can continue to develop into your 30s and your 40s if you continue to practice and you can continue to do deliberate practice, working on specific tasks that are actually going to make you better. Understanding what you actually need to get better at is a skill, and that's why sometimes a teacher and a coach can be effective when you understand what that skill is and you start to work in earnest, meaning you're doing something deliberately so you can get better at it. Chances are you're actually going to get better at it, and that's deliberate practice. I'm going to just give you another definition. It's effortful work that sometimes takes a lot of time and energy, mental energy and physical energy, for you actually to get better at it. And if we apply these skills, it may take from 7 to 10 to 12 years or even 20 years was the last explanation. So the Tenure Rule, in essence, creates about 10,000 hours to mastery. It's not set in stone. That the last point pointed out that depending on how many people are actually in your sport, the culture of your particular society, in the USA, basketball is extremely popular, so it may not take 20 years for someone to actually become very, very good at it, because there are so many people actually playing basketball. In fact, you don't necessarily need to go to a sports school for basketball in the USA, because there's millions of kids on the playground playing. We have a similar example in soccer, or what they call football, in Brazil. Because there are so many kids playing it, it isn't going to take 20 years for someone to become a master of sport. It may take 7 to 10 years, and depending on the individual, it may even be sooner. So the Tenure Rule is an example of, approximately why it might take or how long it might take, but that number could be arbitrary depending on your culture, where you are, and how many people are actually participating in that sport. Historically, humans increase maximum performances over years, decades, and centuries, partially due to evolution, sports sciences, and determination. Example, Olympic 100-meter times over 100 years. They've actually gone down. British Open golf scores over 100 years. They have also gone down. And females in sport over the last 100 years. Golf example. There are many variables to golf. Putting, driving, bunker shots, and golfers have control over their minds. And the area they hit the ball. In other words, a lot of golf is not directly or in direct control of golfer. So sinking 10 to 10-foot putts in a row is unlikely. But hitting within a certain area of the hole is more controllable. The point could be to focus on what you can control. Ultimately, experts are more consistent across all domains. Understanding, interpreting, and using feedback is critical to superior performance. Experts have very similar movement patterns with very little variation when compared to novices who show a more wider movement pattern variation, suggesting it's difficult for novices to be consistent. Dose response for strength training suggests that more may not be better. That is, more may make muscles more tired due to high volumes and intensities with no breaks or recovery time. Problems with sprinting and other power sports. Maximum performances on events are rarely executed, likely because training wasn't periodized, or no taper, or a lack of specific training. Also, many runners have no idea if they're incrementally improving or not. And finally, increasing strength via strength conditioning may not correlate to increased strength of movement in specific sport, nor an increase in performance of sport. Capturing long-distance running. Runners maintain or increase performance by increasing running economy. Running economy is maintained and increased by interval training or fartlek training. Increasing running economy is a specific sport performance indicator and is a better predictor than maximum capacity or VO2 max. The last generalization suggests athletes' development can be monitored and training plans can be selected and designed based on individual needs of athletes, and improvement is based on deliberate practice by athletes of individualized training plans. Level of activity and adaptation. Physical fitness is a function of normal activities, and increasing fitness is a function of habitual, intense, periodized training. Increasing fitness. Elite athletes are outside normal range of novices, and aerobic fitness and increase of a function of threshold training. That is, if you train less than this amount, you get no benefit. Challenge. Balancing fitness training with recovery is a problem many coaches and athletes have. Body's resilience to change. Homeostasis, or the protection of equilibrium, can be adapted and changed via training. That is, the body will adapt and change based on training, and genes in body are only activated through high-performance training. Endurance training is a function of coordination of muscles, then metabolic changes and growth of capillaries, then changes in muscle fiber, then adaptation of heart and arteries, and finally, heat management of body. So the last, let's say, minute and a half or so dealt specifically with some other sports science, more likely strength and conditioning and or, what I like to call anatomy and physiology. The idea behind him giving that explanation, he's actually a trained psychologist, and he's done a lot of work with the mind and figuring out why things actually happen in terms of performance. He blends his lecture into, the sports and strength and conditioning portion of it, because it's almost like you have to. In other words, there's more than one component to excellent performance in anything, and I'm stopping to point out that in sport, not only are we working with the mind, but we're also working in the body. In sport, not only are we doing things repetitiously, but we're doing them specifically for a reason. So we've got to isolate what we're good at and what we're not good at, and then work on the things that we're not really good at the same time maintaining what we're actually good at. So there's a lot of things going on. My suggestion is to listen to this particular audio notes several times, as we have been suggesting through all of them. Then you can get a better gist of actually what's going on. Size of heart and endurance training. Hearts of champion endurance athlete is bigger due to training, and this size reverts when training is stopped or reversed. Similar changes occur when tennis players, or with tennis players' playing arms. That is, muscles of bone in playing arm are bigger because of training. Genes in DNA. By changing the chemical environment, genes in the DNA are activated. Cells and bacteria can change to improve functionality. Thus, turning on genes by changing the environment for cells and bacteria is a function of high-performance training. Limits on modifiability. In 1965, 6,006 consecutive push-ups were performed by Charles Lister, and in 1980, 10,507 consecutive push-ups were performed by Minoru Yoshida. And Thomas R. Hunt sprinted 50 yards on his hands, only in 18.7 seconds. And finally, Johanna Huntslinger of Austria walked from Vienna to Paris 871 miles in 55 days on his hands only. The point could be that there may be no limits to modifying the body for great athletic feats via high-performance training. The development of ballet performance. Bridging higher levels of skill in ballet requires fundamentally different training, and tasks are progressively arranged in increasing levels of difficulty. Monitoring. How far can we track back and see what people are doing? Diaries, journals, and logs are helpful ways to track all aspects of training, feelings, etc. Constraints. Some skills cannot be learned nor obtained due to physiological development of body. Example: adult professional pitchers' elbow flexibility and teenage gymnastics' whole body flexibility, that is, flexibility of joints, may depend on age. Fundamentals. There may be more prerequisites for future elite performance that require a hierarchical building block progression. And if there's a hierarchical progression is not followed, time must be spent to relearn, retrain these skills for elite performances. Toward a science. This paradigm suggests creating a model that progressively teaches building block skills per age group and developmental group, which as a byproduct will require monitoring and evaluating training of several groups. Ultimately, this will create a high-performance training system that can be replicated. What are the deliberate practice fundamentals and or steps to progress students from novice to elite? Toward a theory. Tracking stages of development and creating deliberate practice to increase effectiveness per stage, age group, and skill level. Deliberate practice. Task difficulty can be too easy, too difficult, or optimal. This can be monitored by coach and athlete. Most elite athletes can train 4 to 5 hours per day with breaks. As an aside, USA students of sport are also students. Academic schools, which implies a lot of time is spent studying academics, which further alludes to time spent away from sport that could make them fatigued if they train 4 to 5 hours per day with breaks. Overtraining can happen due to overstress from school and sport. Deliberate practice can be to increase positive transfer and avoid negative transfers. Monitoring development and adaptation from coach and athlete will increase positive adaptations and development. Everyone has genes that can be activated and turned on with high performance training. So that last information piece there, I'm going to just review, and I'll sum it up by saying this. High-performance training is really applicable to the academic school system in as much as the progression from one grade to the next. I think you can really use the same principles in terms of when children, go from pre-K all the way to, basically 12th grade in the USA. There's a organized, designed structure and system to get them from one grade to the next. There is an evaluation progress. There are progress report. There is a way to see how they're doing from week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, and obviously from year to year. These same concepts can be used in all domains. The essence of figuring out why people are doing what and how they're getting to place from another is, for me, in large part, has a large concept with measuring how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and then there are other disciplines too, like sports psychology, that have to be blended in. I'm just pointing all that out because I think a lot of this information may be new to you, or it may sound like there's a lot going on, but think of our academic model and then relate everything that was said in this particular audio notes to the academic model, and I think it can become much more clear. Discussion and Q&A. How do you help the gifted student overcome complacency? Give them increasingly appropriate challenges as they develop and progress. What is the possibility of transferring sport to sport? Example, basketball to handball. The building blocks may be similar, and thus the transfer is a possibility. Also, beginner violinists and basketball players use smaller violins and basketballs, suggesting that transfer within a sport is already there, and building blocks change per age and development and skill levels. Does competitive experience determine success? Example, mini games, matches, etc. Motivation drives most athletes, and competitions are motivating. However, deliberate practice seems to enhance competition performances. More competitions with less practice may not change behavior, nor skill levels. Youth-level athletes' deliberate practice needs to be gradually increased, and fun needs to be added to deliberate practice of youngsters, that is, rewards, games, etc. Gymnastics coach said work ethic may overcome genetics, and genetics does play a part, and the highest genetic athlete does not always medal. The intrinsically motivated athletes appear to achieve success and may not be the highest genetic athlete. Video analysis discussion. Ericcson suggests video review is important if coach and athlete interact or communicate what mental processes or particular skills or moves. That is feedback for why, what happened, and how to improve and enhance performance. In other words, athletes may not know what they're looking for and can waste hours watching videos. Change discussion. Ericcson suggests doing skills or moves you have already mastered could be a waste of time. To develop, grow, and enhance abilities, all students must stretch themselves and change minds to change skill sets. Maintenance of mastered skills is necessary, but more time should be spent on mastering new skills and moves. Training self-discipline discussion. Ericcson suggests athletes should be taught to self-assess and self-monitor their development. When this occurs, self-discipline of athlete will increase, and athletes will know optimal times to train, perform, sleep, eat, rest, and communicate with coach. So just in review, this talk has dealt with a large portion of, I think, my kind of philosophy, in as much as there's a lot of psychology in sport that if we can understand and be able to apply the basics, we can actually, create a better training design and or high performance training plan for our athletes. On the other side of things, coaches need to learn how to, in my opinion, they need to learn how to evaluate the talent and create training designs and or practice plans that accentuate the skill sets that the students may not necessarily be good at. Also, you've got to maintain whatever level of skill you have, and then you have to have a building block so that you're progressing the athletes from year to year. Years ago, when I first learned about periodization, one of the tenets, or principles of periodization was to continue to develop from one year to the next. In other words, so you're not starting over at kindergarten every year that you start training. And I throw that analogy in there because most of the school systems in the USA, they start from pre-K and they go all the way to 12th grade, and each year they actually, the design anyway, is to graduate the student from grade to grade to grade to grade. Studies have shown, though, like if you take the whole summer off and don't do anything at all, it's much harder for that student to become equipped with the information that they used from last year because they didn't apply it all summer. So I'm using that as an example of we have to be able to do the same thing. Although we're training our athletes in a different discipline, if we give them 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 weeks off in between seasons, it's almost like we're starting over. So I'm saying all that because we have to be able to tie all of the information in terms of sports psychology, sports nutrition, evaluating training designs, evaluating the athlete, evaluating ourselves in order for the athlete to have the best training experience and the best opportunity.